We have 24 Catholic schools in the Diocese of Wheeling-Charleston. I've been at 8 of them already in this new school year. And when I'm preaching to children, I can adapt my words to their, if they're grade school children, younger ones, or to high school, I can adapt it to their, the presumed level of understanding. This is a parish mass, right? We have folks who are old, like me. We have folks who are in the middle of life. We have young people, children, adolescents. So when I'm preaching here, it's really up to parents or adults who are with children today to explain as best they can what the homilist was trying to get across, if some of these things may seem to be a little hard for children especially to understand. So parents, pay attention, right? Okay. Now, in our gospel today, Jesus criticizes St. Peter, the future first pope, right, for thinking like human beings do. Well, is it being a little hard on Peter? I mean, after all, Peter's a human being, and so are we. Isn't it natural to think like human beings? Isn't it natural, for example, to want to see our friends avoid pain and suffering? That's what Peter was thinking. So why the sharp rebuke that Peter received? Well, the problem is that we human beings only see a part of the picture, or you might say we see a blurry picture, okay? Our minds, remember that problem of original sin? Yeah, our minds have been not wiped out, but darkened in some ways by original sin, and our wills weakened by original sin, which is that ancient negative inheritance from our first parents. Now, baptism, you say, Father, doesn't baptism forgive sin, original sin, take it away? It does. But the weakening of our will and the darkening of our mind, that is something that takes time and effort to overcome. The effects of original sin still are with us, and the only way to overcome them is to cooperate with God's grace. It's sort of like being in a hospital. You were seriously ill, and the critical moment has passed. You're going to get better, but you still lack full strength. You're not back at full health yet, right? So we have to cooperate with God's grace to gain enlightenment for our mind and strength for our will, that we can choose to do what is right and good, right? And for some people that takes many years. A lot of us are still working on that. And others may never even try. So on our journey toward holiness, we often see only partially or in a blurry way, and we let our emotions and selfish desires, and even sometimes our good desires for others, block our acceptance of God's will. Now, in contrast to us, God sees the whole picture with perfect clarity, all right? And it looks different from his perspective. He knows that the evils that afflict human life and cause so much suffering and hardship must be directly confronted and defeated. We can't just wish them away or avoid them. These evils have to be directly defeated and overcome. Evils such as moral evils, abortion and adultery and so on. Spiritual evils like idolatry or apostasy from the faith. Material evils such as sickness and death. They cannot be simply avoided and wished away. Their power must be broken and their rule vanquished. It's for that reason, to do that God our Father sent his Son into the world, because we aren't strong enough to do that, right? Jesus Christ has overcome evil by letting it do its worst to him, depriving him of justice in the human order, depriving him of his life. Then he laughs at death as he rises from the dead. He laughs at the devil too. His death in our place frees us from our sins. And his resurrection is the assurance that we too will rise to new life. As the eternal Son of God, his sacrifice on the cross, motivated by love for his Father and for us, has infinite value. Jesus has acted as a huge sponge, absorbing all of the evil that ever has or ever will exist, and neutralizing its power to do us permanent harm. It can still hurt us, but it can't wipe us out. God's assured us of that. Through his Son, the Father has redeemed the whole world, not just us, but creation itself. If you wonder why Pope Francis keeps bringing up the need to care for our planet, our common home, it's to remind us to cooperate with God in his redemption of the natural world. God works through us to purify drinking water, to cleanse the air we breathe, to reduce our consumption of excessive amounts of food while others go hungry. He also exhorts us to treat other human beings not as throwaway items, whether they be unborn children or the poor or immigrants, but rather as full members of this human creation. And they're part of God's creation too. And God wants us then to carry on his work of redeeming all of creation. Now, respecting our relationships with God and one another, St. Paul, in his letter to the Romans, our second reading, helps us understand that just as Jesus offered his body on the cross for our salvation, so we are capable of imitating him. With his help, obviously, but we're capable of imitating the Lord. So he says, I urge you, brothers and sisters, by the mercies of God, that's the help we need, right? To offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God, your spiritual worship. Jesus' sacrifice required the death of his body. Ours doesn't. Ours is a living sacrifice in which we offer up to God, what? Our willingness to obey his commandments, which ultimately for our good anyway, but we offer up to God a spiritual worship, our willingness to obey God's commandments. When we make time to pray or to participate in Mass, when we are patient with a disagreeable person or help someone with a task when we ourselves are quite busy, we are loving God and loving our neighbor. These two fundamental truths and commandments Jesus taught can never be separated. Together they are our living sacrifice, our spiritual worship offered to God. Now you can see why Jesus not only was willing to take up his cross and die on it, but why he tells us that we must do the same if we want to be his followers. Whoever wishes to come after me, he says in today's gospel, must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. Not an invitation to Disney World, right? Or to have a wonderful weekend and to eat, drink, and be merry. It's an invitation to accept suffering, really. Love of God and love of neighbor often require accepting the cross. Regarding our faith, some people will ridicule us for practicing our faith. They think we're wasting time here this morning. Why don't we just go rafting on the waters or go to a ballpark or something? Some will deny us work or the right to educate our children as we see fit. Some Christians are even put to death for their faith. That still happens in this world. Our cross may also be in the order of relations with others. It may be spending hours caring for a disabled child or an elderly relative suffering from dementia. It may be staying with a difficult spouse or trying to be loving toward a grown son or daughter who has abandoned the faith. It is love that moves us to carry these crosses, but love entails accepting suffering for others and ultimately for ourselves. But love also brings good fruit, my brothers and sisters. Jesus says to us, whoever wishes to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. Accepting our cross is losing something on the surface, but finding it down in the depths. We are joining ourselves to Christ and his redeeming action in the world. That's why St. Paul says in another place, his letter to the Colossians, I rejoice in my sufferings for your sake, and in my flesh I am filling up what is lacking in the afflictions of Christ on behalf of his body, which is the church. Now, Christ's sufferings, we would all, I think, agree, are sufficient to redeem the whole world. For, as I said before, they have infinite value because he is the very Son of God. But we, the members of his mystical body on earth, his church, participate in his redeeming work, and we extend the fruits of his suffering to others when we bear our sufferings, our crosses, with dignity and love. We're taking part in something that's the great story of the world is really the story of salvation, and we're part of it. The Lord recognizes the sufferings of his disciples as his own. And that's why he said to the as yet unconverted Paul, who was on a mission to arrest Jewish Christians in Damascus, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? Jesus sees our sufferings as extensions of his own. And he would later say to Paul, I will show him what he must suffer for my name. And Paul suffered imprisonment many times, public floggings many times, a shipwreck, riots, and persecution from his own race and from the Gentiles as he went about preaching the gospel. He carried his cross with love, and it bore fruit for many people turning to the true God, as well as for him. So for us too, it is better to think like God, not simply as human beings, and accept the strange truth. It is strange, but the strange truth that bearing our sufferings and even losing our lives for the sake of Christ and his gospel are the way to be more intimately united to the Lord and to offer to God a truly fitting spiritual worship. I heard a man, it was on something on the radio. I have to drive around this state a lot, and after my rosary, put on the radio and see what's going on. I heard a man talk about how he began to believe in God. He was lying on the floor of his apartment. His life had been crashed around him. He had lost his money in bad investments. His friends had turned away from him. A relationship, I don't know if it was a marriage or just he had a girlfriend, broken up. He was really in misery. He's lying on the floor of his apartment, and he said, I cried out, no one's there by him. He cried out, why is life so hard? And he said, I heard from outside me a voice that said, it is supposed to be hard. Now, I would not find much consolation in that, but that man said, I realized that I was not alone. Someone was watching me. He eventually turned to God, and his conversion began. In a world where there is much suffering for us to endure, and to the best of our ability to relieve it in others, we are meant to help others overcome suffering if we can. Life is supposed to be hard, It was for Jesus. It should be for his disciples. If we want to be true to him, then we have to accept his words that the cross is the way to redemption and resurrection. In 1928, during the persecution of the church by the Mexican government, a 14-year-old boy was offered a scholarship to a prestigious school if he would renounce his faith. He answered, "My faith is not for sale." Pope Francis canonized the martyr St. Jose Sanchez del Rio in 2016. A teenager was willing to lose his life in this world to gain it in the next. He joined his sufferings to Christ for the sake of God's people. May we do the same.